Hello KSP fans, my name is Zero Gravitas and you're watching my Realism Overhaul playthrough. Today we're going to launch our first mission. Our aim is to reach a velocity of 150 meters per second and also test out Alice, our semi-intelligent flight computer. The ship we're going to be using is here, the 0001 ELATB Nervous Energy 1. You may think that that name is quite a mouthful, and you are absolutely correct. I use a fairly complex but I think quite useful naming structure. First digits, just four numbers which represent the number of craft. So this is the first craft we're ever launching, so 0001. Then we've got 5 letters. The first one describes the planet that our mission is based on. E for Earth. The next 2 letters, LA, are the situation it's going to be in. So LA stands for low atmosphere. We could also have HA for high atmosphere, SO for suborbital, LO for low orbital. I'm sure you get the idea. TB stands for the type of mission. So TB is test bed. That signifies something which isn't particularly it's not a well-designed probe, it's not got crew on it, it's not going to do mining, it's not going to be a satellite, just a test bed for the systems. Then we come to our the name, Nervous Energy. Those of you who've read Iain M. Banks may recognise it as one of the ship names. I'm going to use different strategies to name different craft. For example, all robotic craft, or all probes, are going to be named after Iain M. Banks ships. All launchers, so big sub-assemblies for launching things, are going to be named after Norse gods. Crewed ships are going to be named after famous scientists, and so on and so forth. I'll get a little bit more into that later. And then the 1 at the end just signifies it's the first launch of this class of ship. So if we have something very similar, it might be called Nervous Energy 2. Anyway, I'm sure what you're interested in is the design we've got here. It's exceedingly simple, and of course, being the first ship, we don't have very many options with regard to what we can use to build with. Some of these engines don't completely work. Non-RO means not really optimised for Realism Overhaul. I have tried to prune this list down as much as I can, but I've had a little bit of difficulty. But anyway, not a huge amount in the way of parts to begin with. We're using the SETI tech tree, which we might have a look at later on, probably in another episode. Anyway, let's look at the craft specs. So here is our craft, the Nervous Energy 1. You can see here it's controlled by the Ranger Block 3 core. This 85 kilogram core contains its own integrated omnidirectional antenna, and also some reaction wheels capable of generating 0.3 kilonewtons of torque, which is actually quite a lot in Realism Overhaul. Because I don't like the way the stock torque system works, where reaction wheels can basically work forever, just giving infinite amount of turning, I've got a mod which reduces that slowly over time. So the more you use torque in one direction, then the more it drops off. Which it's not really realistic, but it's better than the stock system. Power in this rocket comes from the Star 48B solid kick motor. It's got a burn time of 47.8 seconds. I've scaled down to 0.625 meters, and with the mass of this craft, it's going to give a thrust to weight ratio of 1.1. Quite low, but entirely adequate for takeoff. We've got 4 stability fins to put a bit of drag on the rear of the craft. These don't move, so they're not going to have any control. They're just there for the aerodynamic stability. And on the front, the most unusual part, I think, of this rocket is a weighted nose cone containing 492 kilograms of lead. Now, considering this probe weighs just under a ton, that's actually very slightly more than half of the total weight of the ship. Now, why, of course, you ask, am I carrying that much lead? Well, the reason is to limit the thrust of the rocket. Not limit the thrust, limit the thrust to weight ratio, so that we don't go too fast. And also, I wanted to set our delta V at 600 meters per second. This is only our first craft. We don't want it, if it flips over or does anything crazy, we don't want it, you know, rocketing for hours and hours. Don't want it burning miles and miles. With a delta V of about 600, I'm expecting this to reach around about 3,000 meters, but we'll see if that works. In the build that I'm using of the game, all rockets aren't launched directly. Instead, they go through Kerbal Construction Time. And what this does is it adds the craft to a build list. We can bring up a menu here which will tell us this craft will be ready in 12 days, 17 hours, 4 minutes, which I think is quite cool, adds another level of realism. What I particularly like is it means if you've messed something up, let's say you've launched a rocket to the moon with a couple of Kerbals on board and you realise you've forgotten enough life support. In the stock game you can just quickly bang a rocket together, catch up, rendezvous, and you know, sort it all out. Running Kerbal Construction Time, that's not going to work unless you've got the rescue rocket ready to launch already. It takes days, sometimes a month, to finish a rocket, which, we're playing realism. I think that's how it would really work. So anyway, while we wait for that to be built, I would like to have a little discussion of some of the science involved. So let's talk about thrust to weight ratio. So here's our rocket in the VAB. We can see our helpful little scientist down in the bottom left hand corner. I'm going to talk to you about what is thrust to weight ratio. I'm sure a lot of you know this stuff already, but this is partly a trial run on how I might do these little videos, these mini clips. So our rocket obviously is powered. It has a thrust, which is a force upwards. In this case it comes from our solid rocket motor down the bottom, but it could also come from a liquid fueled engine, or an ion drive, or who even knows, a whole variety of different interesting things. The point is they drive the rocket or thrust it forward. When a rocket's launching, however, there's another force operating on it. This is the weight. Now the weight is calculated easily as the mass multiplied by local gravity, and we measure both of these things in newtons. Thrust to weight ratio is the ratio between the thrust and the weight, shockingly enough, which is just the thrust divided by the weight. So if we had a rocket which weighed 2,000 newtons and had an engine with a thrust of 3,000 newtons, do 3,000 divided by 2,000 and give us a thrust to weight ratio of 1.5. What's a good thrust to weight ratio though? Now it's all very well being able to calculate it, but what are we aiming for? Well, if you have a thrust to weight ratio too low, that means you'll accelerate very slowly. This means that your craft is fighting gravity for longer than necessary. And a good way to think about it, if the thrust and the weight were equal, the thrust to weight ratio of 1, then the vehicle would simply hover in one place. Now it would be burning fuel all the time that it's doing that, but not actually going anywhere. So if your thrust to weight ratio is, pretty much 1, then you are wasting a lot of fuel just hovering, just fighting gravity. If your thrust to weight ratio is less than 1, then as soon as we release the clamps, the rocket's going to go downwards. That would not be good. You will not go to space that way. On the other hand though, if your thrust to weight ratio is too high, you accelerate very fast, which leads to high speeds in the lower part of the atmosphere, where it's very thick. Now what that means is you're impacting lots of particles in the atmosphere, which we call air resistance, and that wastes a lot of fuel as well. So the faster you go through thicker atmosphere, then the higher air resistance goes and the more fuel you waste. The ultimate bad point here would be if you had a really high thrust to weight ratio, then you're going to force yourself through the atmosphere so hard it's going to make a lot of friction, which could overheat your craft and explode it. I'm not sure if any of you have had the joy of having a parachute on the front of your ship explode during launch as you get to, I don't know, 20,000 meters or something, travelling at some ridiculously fast speed, and the parachute overheats, and then you know whatever your mission does, the crew are not coming home safely. It's due to a thrust to weight ratio being too high. What's the ideal though? Well, it does depend on the shape of your craft. A very aerodynamic craft, so very streamlined, very sharp and pointy, I suppose you would say. Minimal drag, you could use a high thrust to weight ratio, whereas if it has more drag, so things with lots of wings or not very pointy, I suppose you would say, then you would want a lower thrust to weight ratio, because it can't cut through the air so effectively, so air resistance has a bigger effect, and therefore you don't want it going as fast. We're going to use ranges between 1.1, which is probably a shade too low, and 1.4, which is that's a good ratio. If you really wanted the ideal for an average rocket, probably 1.3. I'm using FAR, which makes a difference, and like I said, I haven't played this Realism Overhaul pack very much, so it might change things. Please feel free to comment if I'm wrong here. There are several exceptions to this, rule of thumb on thrust to weight ratio. Once you're in orbit, it doesn't really matter how fast you accelerate, so thrust to weight ratio isn't really important. You calculate acceleration in space by dividing your thrust by your mass, which gives the acceleration. But because you're not fighting to take off, you're not fighting against gravity, there's not really a minimum that's effective. It just depends on how patient you are. And equally, you can accelerate as fast as you like, as long as it's not so fast that either the pilot gets mushed or the ship tears apart. Aircraft and space planes, they're different as well, because obviously having wings and lifting surfaces means that they can help overcoming gravity. So if your thrust to weight ratio is less than 1 on an aeroplane, it should still be able to take off, just because of the lifting effect of the wings. Basically the lower limit is just more flexible. Well, hopefully that's helped a few things. Let's go back to the Space Center and just see if the vehicle has been completed yet. And here it is, the Nervous Energy 1, sitting on the pad in the long shadows of the early morning. We are going to check systems launch and get prepared. Command, begin pre-flight checks.
Confirmed. Starting final systems test. All launch systems operational.
We have reached a safe distance. Back at the VAB here. Command, initiate launch. Command, initiate launch.
Beginning launch sequence. Flight stability systems online. Throttle open. Final countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff.
Switching to tracking cam. And we have a good launch. Vessel is well clear. Zooming in, the throttle seems to be burning effectively. "46 seconds, 47 seconds, and we have throttle burnout. Approaching apoapsis at 3.76 kilometers now. We have no control. The vessel is dropping. Let's see if we can maintain a path clear of the launch pad. We're at 2,000 meters, descending fast. We are going to impact, and we have impact in the field. All safe, all clear. Mission successful. Well, that was a successful mission there for the Novus Energy 1. Our highest altitude achieved was 3,763 meters. Highest speed we achieved was on the descent just before impact, measured at 254 meters per second. We covered a total of 541 meters over the ground, and the ship was totally destroyed upon impact. Due to the success of this mission, we've earned ourselves 5,555 extra funds. No extra science. However, the next mission we are planning is to launch a almost identical craft with barometer and a thermometer in order to measure temperatures in the lower atmosphere. This is all for now, so it's me, Zero Gravitas, signing off. If you've enjoyed this, then please come and watch again next time for more messing around and learning in Realism Overhaul. Thank you very much, and see you next time.